Hi guys, welcome to my channel and to my Back to Beauty No Buy Year. This year I'm concentrating on using my makeup and not buying any. In today's video, I'm using my makeup to bring to you a ranking all my palettes video. I saw this idea from Kelly Gooch, and of course I'm going to have her channel as well as her video linked down below. In the video, she took all of her palettes from her collection and ranked them from worst to best. And as Kelly said in her video, I will give a little disclaimer. I only own makeup that I love, especially eyeshadow palettes. So when I'm speaking about these palettes and I'm telling you my reasoning behind where they fell in the countdown, it is just me essentially being picky and having to rate one over the other. And so I am not recommending any of these palettes to you. I'm just telling you where they fall on the spectrum for me. Today we're going to be talking about the bottom 25 palettes. I do have 45 palettes, so I decided to break this up into two videos. You'll be seeing the bottom 25 today, and you'll be seeing the top 20 on Wednesday. Coming in at number 45, this may or may not surprise you if you've been on my channel for any length of time, and that is the Urban Decay Naked palette. I failed miserably at panning this palette last year, and the main reason being that it is such a monochromatic color story. It's very pink and gray, and while I like those colors, it was absolutely the worst palette that I could have chosen to try and pan last year. And of all of the palettes that I own, this one inspires me the least. Still a good quality palette though. Coming in at number 44, I have the MAC and Patrick Star Stay With Me Eyeshadow Quad. This was limited edition and it was in the Miso Chic collection. Looks like this. For me, this is not a complete eye look. I would want something light to put on the lid, lighter than this orchid shade. And then the lightest shade here is a matte, which works for a transition, but then again, I don't have anything bright for the inner corner, and I think that that's why I don't reach for this very often. Coming in at number 43 is my Tarte Clay Play palette. When I first bought this palette, I thought it was the bee's knees, mostly because there was every transition, crease, deepening shade that I thought that I wanted. Turns out you don't have to use browns or even neutrals to set up your crease, and so this puppy no longer gets any love. I do like the face shades in here, so I will use them at some point. And then for number 42, this was actually a really hard palette to put in this position for me because I do love the brand as well as the creator. But for me, number 42 is the Revolution Makeup Emily Edits The Needs palette. And I love the face shades in this palette, all 4 of them, but the shadows I'm just not a big fan of. I don't think they're quite as good quality as her shadows in the Wants palette, as well as, again, for me, this is not a complete look. There's no light shimmer for highlighting or anything like that. In fact, the only shimmer is this very, very dark shade called Passion. So for me, it kind of takes away from the convenience of having everything in the palette because I don't feel like for the technique that I like to use most commonly that I can get a full eyeshadow look out of this. Number 41 was another hard pick, mostly because it was a beautiful gift from my beautiful sister, and that is the Lorac California Dreaming palette. And the only reason I put this in at number 41 is because I feel like there is a lot of repeat shades in here, or a lot of shades that are very, very similar. You've got very similar pinks here, very similar dusty purpley plum shades to mid-tone orangey shades. It's just, a lot of these shades look the same on the eyes, but again, this is one of the palettes that I chose for my spring capsule makeup collection. Absolutely going to make use of this puppy come spring or during this early part of spring, but it does come in at number 41. Coming in at number 41 is my ABH Prism palette. This was the holiday palette for 2017. And the reason I put this one where I did is mostly because we have two shades here, Osiris and Throne. Both of these shadows have a black base to them, and that's really how they show up on the eye. Throne can be a little bit more foiled in my opinion, but overall I'm not a big fan of these two shades, and then you have a black in the palette, so that didn't really make sense to me. And then the other reason I put this where it was is because of some of the repeat shades in here. Not exact repeat shades, but similar shades to other ABH palettes. Like this shade Eden is very similar to Roxy and Subculture. Fudge, just about every ABH palette has a warm brown in it. And then this shade Lure is very similar to Dusty Rose in Soft Glam, as well as Bone Fresco in the Modern Renaissance. Coming in at number 39 is the Lorac Unzipped Ocean Sunset palette. Why can I not say that? Anyhow, the reason I put this one where I did is that this palette alone in and of itself is not super exciting to me. These are beautiful shadows, but they're not overly unique to my collection. These two pink shades, certainly not unique. I have about 1,000 gold eyeshadows in my collection. This sort of coppery shade, you have a pearly shimmer here, as well as of course the brown. And so overall I just tend not to reach for this palette because it doesn't overall excite me, though I do like individual shades in that palette. Number 38 is the Suva Protege palette. I got this in a Boxy Luxe in December. It is a very pretty palette, and you do have two highlight shades in here which absolutely function as highlighters on the face. But my one gripe with this palette is that there are no mid-tone mattes. You have some light mattes, you have some deeper mattes, and then you have these mid-tone shimmers. I don't know. I just feel like this palette is missing something. It's somewhat incomplete. All right, so coming in at number 37, unfortunately, is my Wet n Wild Comfort Zone palette. I do love this palette, and I revived her and used her recently in my least expensive Get Ready With Me video. But while these shades are fan-freaking-tastic, the longevity of these eyeshadows is not on my eyes in comparison to other shadows that I use over the same base. I always use the Urban Decay Primer Potion for all of my looks. It's the only one I have, so it's a real bummer that these don't last all day for me. I've heard that the original formula on the Comfort Zone was better, and that might be the case with this. But number 36 is my Huda Beauty Mauve Obsessions palette, and I do like this palette for sure, but the reason I put this where I did is because the shimmers are very chunky. So it takes a little manipulation, either a glitter glue or definitely foiling the shadows, as well as I think they could have skipped one or the other of these two shades here. I think on the eye they present pretty similarly, and I would have loved to have seen maybe a lighter plum, like a light plum or a light pink, something that's more of a blending shade than this cream color right here. Coming in at number 35, I have a 35 pan palette, and it's not Jaclyn, it is my Morphe 35F Fall Into Frost, she's called. And the reason I threw this one in at this place is that this palette, while beautiful and the formula is actually really nice, there's so many repeat shades in here. I just can't even, like these three shades right here, why they look pretty different. They really translate similar, as well as all of these lighter shades. I do like that they only did one row of mattes, but I wish there was a bit more of a difference, especially on the eye with the rest of these shades. Coming in at number 34 is my Alamar Reina del Caribe palette volume 1. This is actually the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today, along with my Pan That palette. And the only reason that I put this one where I did, because these four shimmers are beautiful, but these four mattes for me are completely dupes within my collection. I probably have these four shades over and over and over again in my collection. Specifically, I have all four of these shades essentially in my Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. All right, coming in at number 33 is my Winky Lux Kitten palette, which I also received from BoxyCharm. This is a 9-pan palette, and the shades are beautiful. However, I tend not to reach for this one again because there aren't enough unique shades in this palette that cause me to want to reach for it. This shade right here is a duochrome that is absolutely stunning, and 9 times out of 10 when I reach for this palette, it's for that one shade. Then coming in at number 32, I feel like we're doing like a Billboard countdown or something. Hopefully this is just as exciting. Number 32 is my Revolution Makeup Fierce as Fire palette. This was a gift with purchase that my girl Angela had a duplicate of and passed along to me. And I do really like this palette. It's really fabulous quality. The colors are gorgeous. However, I don't tend to do a lot of warm sunsetty looks overall, but it is beautiful. It's just, I don't reach for it. I think of this as automatically going to be a pinky or a warm sunset look. And then another BoxyCharm palette is the Ace Beauté Grandiose palette. This is one of my palette partners this month, as is the Alamar palette. And I do like this palette. However, my one gripe is that these two shades right here are very, very similar on the eyes, and I wish that they had added something different to make the palette just a little bit more versatile. Even if they had made this golden shade, well, it's kind of bronze, even if they had made this a more yellowy true gold, I think it would have added more value to the palette than these two shades that are very similar. Coming in at number 30 is my Milani Pure Passion palette. I do love this palette. This palette, as all of these styles of palettes from Milani, I think would be fabulous for traveling, and that is where I tend to reach for this one. It's a very warm, neutral color story. I would venture to say it's very similar to the Naked Heat, but these shadows are a fabulous quality. It's just a very specific and unexciting color story for me. Next, I think some people might be a little surprised, if not indignant about, and that is my Too Faced Sweet Peach palette, coming in at number 29. This was my very first high-end palette, along with my Jaclyn Hill palette. And if you're following my hashtag Pan As Old As Time, Pan That palette project this year, you know that I am panning Jaclyn and not this one, because we are panning our oldest, or one of our oldest palettes. I knew that this was not the palette for me to pan. While I love individual shades within this palette. Like, I love this greeny shade called Bless Her Heart and several others. As a whole, this palette does not inspire me. I don't look at this and be like, oh yeah, I could create this really awesome look with those shadows. No, I tend to grab for individual shades within this palette to pair with another palette, and that's why she comes in at number 29. I know, I had to put everybody somewhere. It's kind of a really hard job. I challenge you to rate your palettes, okay? Next at number 28 is the Bad Habit Athena palette. This came from Shop Hush, which is a website or an app really where you can buy dupe palettes for high-end palettes at an affordable price. So this is supposed to be a dupe for one of the Huda Beauty palettes, but my gripe with this dupe palette is that the matte shades are very, very powdery. And I'm talking like subculture powdery, which doesn't always bother me, but with these, I think it kind of makes the mattes a little bit patchy when working with them. The shimmers are really beautiful and I do like using them. That's about what I always reach for. And again, this pressed glitter, I just honestly want to dig it out and get it out of this palette. Coming in at number 27 is my Rimmel Magnifies Jewel Rocks Edition. Say that 3 times fast. And the only reason that this one falls where it does is that the shimmer shadows in this palette take a bit of building to get to the opacity and the level of shine that I like to have. But it's a beautiful color story. The mattes blend like a dream, and I highly recommend this palette. It just, for me, you know, if I'm getting picky, which I had to with 45 palettes to rank, this one takes a little bit more work, maybe like in comparison like with an ABH palette where you have to work a little bit more with that palette to achieve the same look. And then coming in at number 26 is my BH Take Me Back to Brazil palette. Again, I love this palette. This was my go-to palette for color for quite a while before I started collecting colorful eyeshadows. But this does have a beautiful array of colors in this palette. However, I have a few complaints. These 2 Transformer shades are very, very chalky, and I don't think they actually transform any of the shadows, in my opinion. They do work as an inner corner highlight or even a brow bone highlight for me, but when layered over these other shadows, it just kind of looks pasty and white. And then my other complaint is that this is a mixture of mattes and shimmers. However, there is not a consistent formula here in this palette. Some would work better than others, some build better than others, and so on and so forth. So this puppy is coming in at number 26. All right, time for the top 5 of the bottom 25 palettes. Did that make any sense to you? I hope so. Coming in at number 25 is the ColourPop Element of Surprise palette. The only reason this palette ended up where it did is because I really only reach for this palette for the shimmer shades. I don't find the mattes to be overly exciting. However, I do really like this shade right here called Silk Street. It looks very uninteresting in the pan, but it's a beautiful sort of deep berry, raspberry shade that I really like. Also a palette partner for April. Coming in at number 24 is my Face Candy Atlantis palette, which is my other dupe palette. I guess we can actually call it a dupe now because Tarte did come back a year later. Come on, Tarte, get your poop in a group. And finally create the Icy Betch palette that they April Fool's us with last year. So here's this beautiful palette. I do love it. I wish there was only one or the other of these 2 shades right here. They're both very light, very chalky blues. And then you have this very, very white matte. So I don't think you need like all 3 of these. That was kind of a waste of space. But otherwise, I really like this palette. She just came in where she did because the mattes are quite powdery and a little difficult to work with, but it just takes a little extra time and TLC. And then it hurts my heart to put this palette where I did, but coming in at number 23 is my Revolution Makeup, the Emily Edit, the Wants palette. I love this palette. I know a lot of people don't, but I really do. But my one complaint is that a lot of the shimmers, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my shimmers in this palette have done this thing where they seal off, but basically there's a seal over part of the eyeshadow, and I'm not for sure why it does that, and that's why she came in at number 23. I'm sorry, Emily, I love you. And then coming in at number 22 is my BH Zodiac palette. Stunning palette, beautiful shades, beautiful formula. My only complaint with this one is that the shimmers are very chunky. There's quite a bit of fallout. I definitely recommend a glitter glue as well as foiling the eyeshadow if possible. This it could be really messy if you're not careful with it, but the result is absolutely stunning. So that is why this one came in at number 22. And the last palette for the bottom, the best bottom palette, if you will, and coming in with a controversial palette for the last bottom palette is the ABH Subculture palette. I love this palette. I know a lot of people don't, but this palette comes in at number 21 because it's just harder to work with. We all know that. I love working with it, but it is time consuming. And both of these shimmer shades, Electric and Cube, also do that sealing over thing. So it's kind of difficult to apply these shadows. I did buy some sponge tip applicators and that does help, but it's kind of a bummer, and that's why she comes in at 21. So those are my bottom 25 palettes. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I ranked my palettes. This was actually a really difficult exercise, and I commend Kelly, obviously, for coming up with the idea. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you will tune in on Wednesday for my top 20 palettes. I can't wait for you to see which palette I picked for number 1. And with all of that said, I hope all of your makeup days are absolutely beautiful makeup days, and I will see you in my next video soon.